As writers and filmmakers, continuing education is important. We should learn from the best, watch great movies, read great literature. In fact, we should watch and read pretty much everything. Read everything from the classics to trash. Watch great movies and watch movies that can teach you what not to do. This is something I've been doing on a formal basis for the past several years. I make up my own film school curriculum. Every year, I make a list of what I call the 50 greatest movies to study. So in this video, I'll take you through the list I made for 2021. These are movies I watched in 2021, not movies that were necessarily released in 2021. I started this tradition in the aughts when I came across a guide at a used bookstore that listed the 100 greatest movies of all time. So being a filmmaker, I made it my mission to watch the movies on the list. Now, many of the movies I had already seen, so I decided to fill in the gaps and watch the ones that I hadn't seen yet. And I started doing this every year, consulting different greatest of lists. Now, a lot of these lists do include truly great movies. Movies like Casablanca and The Wizard of Oz, one of my all-time favorites, and Citizen Kane. And occasionally you'll see a movie by a female director or a Black director by Spike Lee, something like Do the Right Thing, or maybe The Piano by Jane Campion, which was actually on my list for 2021. But I began to notice that a lot of these best of lists, the list of greatest movies of all time, were really lacking in diversity. So what I started doing was I started making my own list, doing my own research, and compiling a film school curriculum of the greatest movies to watch every year with an emphasis on diversity. I include movies by Black directors, of course, movies by women directors, movies with LGBTQ themes or by LGBTQ directors, movies about people with disabilities or special needs. And also, I include movies that were adapted from previous material like books or plays. This video is the first in a couple of installments where I'll take you through my 2021 list. And I'll start with the movies that I watched early in the year in January. I kicked off my 2021 greatest movies to study with a movie that's appropriate for wintertime, Cool Runnings, the 1993 comedy drama about the Jamaican bobsled team that competed in the Winter Olympics. The movie was directed by John Turteltaub and stars Dougie Doug, Malik Yoba, Leon, and John Candy. This movie was really entertaining, and I liked how it took you from Jamaica and kind of just showed everyday life in Jamaica, and it shows how the team banded together and overcame challenges to compete in the Olympics. Cool Runnings is a classic sports movie about underdogs triumphing against the odds and learning to work together to achieve a goal. Also in January, I watched a bilingual movie that is in Spanish and English called Under the Same Moon, or La Misma Luna. This drama was directed by Patricia Riggin and stars Kate Del Castillo, Eugenio Derbez, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, America Ferrera, and Adrian Alonso. This touching story really shows how devastating our broken immigration system can be for people. Kate Del Castillo plays a mother who immigrates to America and leaves her young child back in Mexico so that she can come to Los Angeles and try to build a better life for her son. But in the meantime, her son tries to follow her and ends up getting lost. And there's a long period where you're not sure if mother and son are ever going to be reunited. Anyone who has any kind of heart for the plight of immigrants should watch this movie. I found it really, really moving. And as someone who has been studying Spanish and trying to become fluent, I always try to include movies in Spanish to help me with my fluency. And this movie not only helps if you're a language learner, but you'll definitely learn something about immigration and the people who are affected by it by watching Under the Same Moon. As I mentioned, I always include movies about people with disabilities or special needs. And one of those movies that I watched this year is the 2016 Netflix movie Brain on Fire, written and directed by Gerard Barrett and starring Chloe Grace Moretz, Jenny Slate, Carrie Ann Moss, and Tyler Perry. I watched Brain on Fire in the middle of the year in May 2021. Now, this true story is based on Susanna Callahan's memoir about a mysterious illness she suffered as a young woman when she was a reporter working at a tabloid in New York. Her behavior became increasingly erratic, making her parents and her boss, played by Tyler Perry, as well as her sympathetic coworker, played by Jenny Slate, start believing that she was maybe addicted to drugs or was having some kind of nervous breakdown. Now, it finally turns out that she has some kind of neurological disorder. And back to the theme of immigration, it is a doctor who is an immigrant who finally correctly diagnoses her. Brain on Fire is not necessarily easy to watch, but I think it's important to watch to understand how scary it can be when you have an illness and you're misdiagnosed. And I think watching movies like this can help us have compassion for people who are suffering with these kind of conditions. Now, a movie I watched over the summer in August 2021 is the 2015 sort of, I don't know if it's a drama or comedy or a dramedy called Dope. This 2015 movie was written and directed by Rick Famuyiwa, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, and stars Kimberly Elise, Zoe Kravitz, and Shamik Moore. So Dope got a lot of acclaim when it came out in 2015, and it's sort of like an African-American Superbad, but not really as raunchy. Dope centers on a small group of multicultural high school students, a young Black man, a young Black woman who happens to be gay, and their friend, who I believe is Latino, or I'm sorry, I didn't catch the race of the other character who is not Black, but he's also a person of color. And the movie follows these teens through misadventures as they get caught up in a drug deal gone wrong. I really enjoyed Dope, and the characters are into 90s hip hop. So it's sort of a throwback to that era of like Boys in the Hood. I found it very entertaining, and the characters are well rounded. It's sort of a hood movie, but the characters are not stereotypical, quote unquote, urban characters. In fact, the main character is trying to get into college and trying to do well on his SATs. So I liked how the movie turned stereotypes on its head and gave a new interpretation of the hood movie genre that was so popular in the 90s. A movie I watched in the fall, in October 2021, is Car Wash, the 1976 movie that has come to be a classic in Black cinema. Car Wash was directed by acclaimed African-American director Michael Schultz and was written by Joel Schumacher, who of course went on to become a famous director himself with some of the Batman movies. What I love about Car Wash is it's not the typical blaxploitation movie that became popular in the 70s. It's just about a group of guys who work at a car wash, hence the title, and are just coping with everyday problems like trying to get ahead in life and trying to find someone to date. Richard Pryor makes a cameo appearance as a flashy preacher who was obviously based on Reverend Ike, the prosperity gospel televangelist who was popular in the 70s, and the Pointer Sisters, including one-time member Bonnie Pointer, who ended up leaving the group before they became a trio, is featured. And it's just a slice of life of the 70s. And you can see where movies like Friday from the 90s, which is just a movie about, average guys hanging out, really owes a debt of gratitude to Car Wash. And one cool little thing about Car Wash is that just by chance, I watched the movie before director Michael Schultz and a good friend of mine, author and journalist Will Haygood, came to my city, Columbus, Ohio, to speak at the Wexner Center for the Arts. Now, I have a connection to the Wexner Center for the Arts. That's where I edited along with my editor, Paul Hill, my documentary, Lady Wrestler, about the Black women who integrated pro wrestling in the 50s. So it was cool getting to see Will and curator Dave Philippi and Michael Schultz, who spoke via Zoom because he had had an injury on set. He's still a working director and wasn't able to fly in. But it was really cool hearing Michael Schultz tell behind the scenes stories about Car Wash. And it's a movie that all Black directors should definitely check out for its pacing and character development and just an overall good story about average people living their lives. Now, another movie I watched in the fall is much more grander in scale and scope than Car Wash. It is the movie Lion in Winter. It was directed by Anthony Harvey and was written by James Goldman, based on the stage play of the same name. I would describe Lion in Winter as Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf meets Game of Thrones. It's a family drama about a British king played by Peter O'Toole and his wife played by Katharine Hepburn, and how they decide who will be the successor to the throne. The reason why I compare Lion in Winter to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Game of Thrones is the obvious analogy because it's about kings and the grandeur of people who lived in another time and lived in castles and that kind of thing. But the allusion to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is these really snappy, sarcastic lines. And Katharine Hepburn really has some funny lines and some really sarcastic lines. And it's interesting that Katharine Hepburn is supposed to be playing like this royal woman from France, but Katharine Hepburn is not even attempting a French accent. So I guess we should sort of be grateful for that, because for some reason I can't see Katharine Hepburn doing an authentic French accent. And other heavyweights in the cast include a young Anthony Hopkins as the king's son who wants to ascend to the throne, but may not get that chance. And a funny thing that happened while I was watching Lion in Winter, I kept thinking oh my God, he's a dead ringer for Timothy Dalton, who at one point played James Bond. And it turns out it was Timothy Dalton. For some reason, I didn't think Timothy Dalton was old enough to have been a young adult in the 60s. I thought Timothy Dalton was younger than that, but sure enough, that was Timothy Dalton. Lion in Winter is definitely worth studying as a filmmaker for the grand sets and intricate costumes and the really snappy dialogue. There's a lot there to sink your teeth into, and I would definitely recommend studying Lion in Winter if you want to be a filmmaker. Now, in contrast to Lion in Winter, a small, intimate, modern movie that I watched also in the fall in November of 2021 was a movie called Last Days of Capitalism. Last Days of Capitalism is a micro-budget movie written and directed by Adam Mervis and starring Mike Faiola and Sarah Rose Harper. Now, Last Days of Capitalism is sort of like your classic micro-budget indie movie with just two characters and one setting. It's about a rich man who hires a prostitute to keep him company during a stay in a hotel in Vegas. With only two characters, it's a very, very engaging story, despite having just one setting and two characters. You wonder, is this rich man trying to kind of corrupt this young woman by trying to buy her affections? Is the young woman basically selling her soul to this rich man? And then there's a twist at the end that I won't give away, in which it turns out that this young woman is not as innocent and naive and easily manipulated as she seems. But definitely check out The Last Days of Capitalism for how to make a micro budget movie. And I think the budget for this movie was roughly $40,000, and have it look quality and have quality sound and have really good performances from the actors. Now, another movie in that vein, a micro budget movie that's really high quality, is a movie called A Good Day to Be Black and Sexy. This 2008 film was directed by Dennis Dortch. Pretty much all the characters in the movie, with the exception of a few Asian characters, are Black. And this movie doesn't have so much of a plot as it's like a series of vignettes. And it's really interesting. This movie was obviously shot on digital video because you can kind of tell it's a little bit grainy. And when it's in low light, you can especially tell that it's not film, that it's digital video. But the director really does a great job with what he has to work with. All of the shots are either close up or medium length. You can't really see like much of the scenery in the background, and you can tell it's handheld. And while that may seem kind of claustrophobic, but this sort of cinema verite style works really well for these little vignettes, which are just little slices of life, like couples arguing and a family having dinner together. So this just goes to show that if you have limited resources and you don't have access to like a lot of fancy sets or costumes or special effects, or even really like a narrative story with a beginning, middle, and end, you can really do a lot if you know how to use a camera and tell a good story without a whole lot of extras or a whole lot of fuss. So, A Good Day to Be Black and Sexy basically takes Black characters and a couple of Asian characters in an urban setting and sort of applies like a European art house feel to it. I thought A Good Day to Be Black and Sexy was really, really innovative, and I would really recommend checking it out. A movie that's similar to A Good Day to Be Black and Sexy is actually a movie that on the surface you would think has nothing in common with that movie about Black characters in an urban setting. And what I'm referring to is a 2008 drama called Treeless Mountain. This very small moving drama was written and directed by So Young Kim, and it's a really moving story. It's set in an Asian country, I believe it's Japan, about two little girls who are under the age of 10 who are basically abandoned by their mother and left to live with relatives who are reluctant about taking on the responsibility of raising these two little girls. This is another movie that doesn't really have a plot per se, other than the girls being abandoned by their mother. But it just is so touching seeing these two little sisters interacting with each other, playing together like how kids play, saving money in this little piggy bank that their mom gave them before their mother ran off, and trying to save their money and doing frivolous things with their money, like buying treats like little kids will do. Treeless Mountain is just a moving story about how powerless children are, but in another way about how strong and emotionally resilient children can be. Just like A Good Day to Be Black and Sexy, there's a lot of close-ups and medium shots, not a whole lot of wide shots, but there's a lot of handheld close-ups and not a lot of story going on, just these little girls interacting with each other and with their relatives and trying to adjust to life without their mother and wondering if their mother is ever going to come back. I found it really, really moving. And I can understand why this movie won awards at film festivals like the Dubai Film Festival and the Berlin International Film Festival. Treeless Mountain is a little movie with just a few characters, but it's very engaging and very moving. One of the movies I enjoyed watching the most this year was a movie from 1992 called One False Move. Now, I watched this movie toward the end of the year in December 2021. This 1992 crime drama stars Cinda Williams, Michael Beach, Billy Bob Thornton, and Bill Paxton. And it tells the story of three criminals who are kind of on the run: Cinda Williams, Billy Bob Thornton, and Michael Beach, and a small town cop played by Bill Paxton, who is pursuing these criminals with the help of some big city cops from LA. Now, there's a twist when you find out that Bill Paxton and Cinda Williams have been involved with each other in the past. And it makes you wonder if Bill Paxton is going to let her go free, even though she's killed someone and robbed people, along with her boyfriend, played by Billy Bob Thornton, and Michael Beach, who plays against type as kind of a ruthless criminal. I personally think Cinda Williams is an extremely underrated actress, and this movie is very, very underrated. I looked it up on Wikipedia, and I think it made less than $2 million at the box office. But this movie is so gripping. It's such an entertaining thriller with really authentic performances and really three-dimensional, well-rounded characters. I highly recommend checking out One False Move. So that's it for this video about the movies I studied in 2021 for my self-made film school curriculum. And in the next installment, I'll talk about a movie, a classic that I did not like that was recommended by Spike Lee, as well as a period movie that I thought I would hate because I hated the book when I listened to it the first time on audiobook. But then it sort of grew on me. So I hope you'll join me for the next installment. Thanks for watching.